Good evening. My name is Kutan. I'm one of the three members of the 2020 Young Architects plus Designers Committee. In addition to being one half of Young Anayata, I'm also an associate professor and the vice chair of the Department of Architecture and Urban Design at UCLA. I'm very excited to introduce the two Architecture League Prize winners tonight. On the night number 2, we are welcoming rigorous designers who are also full-time teachers in significant institutions, educating the next generation of architects. They are David Eskenazi of d.esk, who teaches as a full-time faculty at SciArc in Los Angeles, Leslie Locke and Sasa Zivkovic of HANA, both of whom are assistant professors at Cornell in Ithaca. Their creative body of work is impressive and full of potential. Their written contributions to the discursive growth of architecture is already significant. More on the winners in just a minute. First, about the team value. So much has changed since the day of the jury, when we contemplated the merits of what was in front of us, the potentials of their trajectories. The world which defined our value structures has been shaken to its core. Our way of life evolved radically through these last few months, unknown for how much longer. Things we took so much for granted vanished from our daily lives. We embraced a new collective which sacrificed individual comfort for the health and well-being of our most vulnerable. We started to confront a long overdue racial injustice in our society, in our discipline, at last. For this generation of young architects who are on the springboard to leap forward towards the next chapter of their speculative journey, it will be interesting to see how this significant moment tests their resolve, alters their discourse, reaffirms their convictions, and redefines their values in a moment of cultural unrest and transformation. Together with Mina Henry and Kevin Hurt, as the 2020 Young Architects Designers Committee, we wanted to develop a theme for this year's edition of the competition by casting a large net to register the pulse of young designers who are developing in a discipline without a definitive center. Our goal was to establish a broad enough theme which would hopefully push the entrants to formulate their arguments in an extremely specific and precise manner in their response. The word value can be stretched in any one direction. Value can be understood as economy, as color, as measure, as ethics, as well as aesthetics. In its essence, though, it's what drives our individual take on the world as we project onto its collective future. The diverse spectrum of positions taken by all the entrants reinforced our reading of the moment in the discipline of architecture, which seems to be orbiting around multiple centers, generally independent from one another's gravitational pull, rarely letting other forces influence their own isolated spheres, keeping their values in separate walls. It's crucial, though, to find overlapping interests amongst varying positions so new discourse can be cultivated through exchange, collaboration, friction, agreement, and yes, productive disagreement. The two practices we are celebrating here tonight thread through each other's territory of investigation in an interesting manner. While the initial set of triggering architectural ideas, their representations, engagement of digital technologies, means and methods of design execution, their physical manifestation, attitudes towards fabrication radically differ in each practice. To subvert the commonly accepted and calcified notions of materiality and their unexplored aesthetic expressions seem to be a shared ambition. David Eskenazi's work is rigorous, disciplined, and perplexing. His fascination with paper, both in its semantics and materiality, produced an unusual body of work which manages to turn slumpy, clumsy, mundane, and casual into a strangely expressionless fantastic. Paper, which is commonly used in architectural circles as a material where specific geometry and material properties hand-in-hand fight gravity, Eskenazi lets gravity dictate how the material conforms in its slow failure, resulting in fascinating tectonics. But this is no pure act of material parametrics. His craftful and virtuoso performance to mediate back and forth between the analog and digital realms gives the work an uncanny sense of ambiguity where gravity-less digital input is pit against physical performance. What looks effortless and easy is in fact a disciplined labor of intuitive subversion of familiar material properties. The jury quickly recognizes sustained efforts and rigor in the work's current status and its future potentials. Leslie Locke and Sasa Zivkovic of HANA, on the other hand, are perhaps more akin to mad digital fabricators, only they don't seem to be interested in bracketing themselves within commonly established aesthetics of digital fabrication. The fetish of new technologies or their idealism play no part in their explorations and expressions. They make their own 3D printers, hack software systems, generate systemic rule sets to tailor the way in which they impose their will on material work configurations, invent new ways in which digital fabrication protocols are utilized, all towards the possibility of alternate aesthetic contemplations. Their action cabin immediately captured the imagination of the entire jury. Their approach to sustainability, the unexpected use of robotics on timber, critiquing the notion of building foundations, the odd expression of assembly, and the casual but disciplined formal definitions of an architectural primitive were few traits of discussion triggered by the project. It is exciting to feel the creative pressures of the next generation of architects. It makes me question my own biases and settled assumptions about how I assume the limits of architecture. I'm happy that I got exposed to your sensibilities. I certainly learned from you, and I will certainly be on the lookout to see how your practice and teaching will develop into the future, influencing the younger generation of architects that will follow you. Congratulations. Let's find out what you have in store for us. Just a quick reminder for our general audience. Please remember to stay for the live session following the pre-recorded presentations by the winners, when we'll have a moderated conversation. We will also field audience questions received via Zoom chat. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I wish we were together tonight, and I hope that you're all healthy. Thank you to the Architectural League, to Anne, Katerina, and Sarah for putting this all together, and to the jury for selecting me for this year's League Prize. I really appreciate that you support young architects in whatever form their work comes in. It's a real honor, so thank you so much. This year's competition theme value is certainly on point for what the year has come to be, a year to re-examine how values have been constructed in our society. I believe that we must all take on the work of dismantling racist policies, advocate for strong global health leadership, and plan for the coming climate catastrophe. I can't claim that my work in any way addresses these urgent issues, but I do hope that the pursuit of architectural questions and speculation is still welcome in today's moment. I believe the value of architecture is to question all of the weight that comes to bear where we plan before we build. So I had a hard time negotiating two impulses that I had for today's lecture. On one hand, was to speak about the ideas I've had for a few years concerning zooming in models. On the other hand, I've had a sense to speak about queerness in architecture. The first is disciplinary, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, and the second is more personal and difficult to unpack. As I grappled with the right topic for tonight, I realized that zooming and queerness might not be that far apart, so please bear with me as I try, successfully or not, to tie them together as I present my work. Architecture imagines large objects in the world that scale up from documents. We could describe scale as the value of enlargement from a set of drawings or models. We construct a one-to-one drawing or model to imagine something palpable, probably small, that only a handful of people will get to see, use, and construct. On the other hand, we make 1 to 1,000 documents to coordinate construction and plan for use by many. Scale is the means by which all architects bias one value over another, perhaps social organization at 1 to 100, or detail assembly at 1 to 10. Scale isn't simply a material proposition. It embeds audiences, regulations, collaborators, and labor into our imagination. Scale is a value agnostic to the shape of architecture, but biased towards its material details. Zooming, on the other hand, doesn't bias one over another. Something small is the same as something big. In my work, I imagine an architecture shaped by zoomed materiality. I make models at various sizes, and I'm interested in their differences. I let those models stand, sag, and slump. I draw at different zooms and compare results. My practice engages both built and speculative work, but by always considering the working spaces that the work is imagined within. The digital models are already physical, the drawings already digital. I embed these differences into the shape of the architecture too. The practice's work aims to flatten the hierarchies of scale drawing, the separation of small from large, from one from many, of instruction from imagination. I favor zooming and I work on scale because the scale works on us. I'm going to show 4 recent projects: a vacation house, an installation, a speculative form, and a proposal for a public bathhouse. These were completed with an incredible team whose effort I want to acknowledge: Julie Riley, Jishan Wen, and Jutra Brown. Thank you all so much. Oops. Here we go. So I'm going to start with a vacation house currently under construction in the Yucatan. It's in Mexico, deep in the jungle, a few hundred feet from the ocean, and it's titled Zigger Hut. There's a main house. It takes the form of 2 stepped forms within the courtyard bounded by a perimeter wall. There's a main house, a guest house, and a pool. The project begins from local construction methods, in this case, concrete masonry unit construction on a low budget. The name Zigger Hut comes from the form of the ziggurats. In Yucatan, we find Mayan stepped pyramids, most famously Chichen Itza nearby. The step form is found in many diverse prehistoric societies, although only those in Mesopotamia are named ziggurats. The form interests me as a foreigner working in this area for its sense of universalism and specificity, the local and the global, and the sense of stepping as a kind of spatial ascension in a domestic setting. The project began by thinking about the idea of scale in relationship to shape and human reference. Both houses are the same rectangular step form with windows and doors. In the left drawing, the houses are shown at the same scale. You can see that they're different sizes and that the windows are scalable. But the door, because it's specific to a human size, doesn't change. On the right is a drawing showing the houses at the same size, drawn at different scales as a way to compare the similarities of shape in the sense that the door is size specific. This drawing I would call a zoomed working space, the space in which my practice designs. Human figures annotate the size while all things are zoomed to the same level. Here are the 2 forms. The left is the main house. It's a 2-story house that consists of a bedroom and living spaces, while the guest house on the right includes 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. They're both casually intersected by a stair. One stair you can walk up, and the other is a differently sized form of a stair. In this plan, you can see the main house in the lower left of the drawing. Maybe you can see my cursor, I'm not sure. I'll move it over. And the guest house is in the upper right part of the plan. The site is bounded by a perimeter wall where outdoor showers and fireplaces intersect the wall and surround a courtyard and pool. Here in the ground plan, you can see the living spaces of the main house. You can see the dining space, the kitchen, living spaces. You can also see in the guest house the 2 bedrooms and the shared bathroom. In the outdoor spaces, the pool, a space for outdoor dining, and a kind of garden in the upper left. There's a sense that the stepping feels like 3-story buildings when in fact they're much smaller, a 2-story and a 1-story building. And what I love about this image is that you get the sense of a kind of urbanism or a city at a much smaller scale, but in fact located in the middle of the jungle. The house is currently under construction. Here you see some of the details of the masonry construction. I especially love how the texture of the unfinished wall makes it seem woolly and soft in contrast to the exacting geometric intersections you can see on the right. While working on this project, I was invited to construct an installation at Woodbury University, where I chose to make a 1:2 scale model of the Zigger Hut. This image is a photograph of a model that was built after the installation was completed, and I'll return to this in 1 minute. In thinking about the form of the stepped massing of Zigger Hut, I thought of Robert Smithson's pointless vanishing point, where Smithson constructs a sculpture that reifies the 3-dimensional space suggested by 2-dimensional perspectival construction. The sculpture can be seen as a kind of material diagram that exists between the material, physical world and the conceptual space of a perspective drawing. I thought that a model of the ziggurat would occupy a similar space, a material diagram, but I was interested in size in the sense that Smithson's sculpture could be built at any size. Its physicality, while real, is not specific. We built this version of the Smithson sculpture based on the ziggurat, as you can see here, but now with a sense of specific materiality. It's constructed of loose craft paper, letting it slump. Its form is size-specific, and it can't be scaled up or down. And we named this installation Slump Model. Here are the different sizes of building the truncated step mass at different sizes of craft paper. In the smallest on the left, you can see that the paper generally keeps the precision of geometry. And as the model gets bigger, as it approaches the size of the gallery all the way on the right, you'll see that the material lets go of its geometric rig and slumps down. In that version, I mean, you can really see how wild it gets. And this is also the version where we add the windows and doors back into it. The plan of the gallery at Woodbury takes after the gallery's name, the Wedge Gallery, which is a kind of perspectival construct. The model is formed to the plan and takes up as much space as it can while allowing for visitors to walk around it. This is the interior compared to a construction photo of ziggurat. There are tent poles resting in concrete masonry units that the paper rests on. In the back, you can see the smaller windows and doors, and it feels quite intimate compared to where the house kind of lands. And this is a photograph of the exterior of the installation. The form is a bit tired, it's slumping, it's not geometric, it doesn't resist gravity, it seems a bit worn out. This work for me led to a new series of ideas about materiality in models. It recalls some previous conversations about paper architecture and the sense of the unbuilt in architecture as model. To me, this project opens up a new conversation within that world, one that suggests a closer look at the role of size-specific forms and the architectural models that would accompany them. The work of artists like Eva Hesse and Robert Gober come to mind. For Hesse, on the left, seriality is a form of comparing the slight differences that emerge from handmade fiberglass cylinders, each slightly slumped and arranged differently in each installation. The forms allow material to react to geometry, and the arrangement is not specific. I pair Hesse with a sculpture by Robert Gober because Gober's sculpture is figural, whereas Hesse's is abstract. In Gober's piece, a body is sculpted to look like a paper bag. The figure has traits associated with gendered bodies, the female breast, the male chest hair. As figural as it is, the sculpture is also bound by a rectangle enclosed in an abstract frame. The sculpture is life-size, yet the folds of the paper are enlarged. It's both real and a model. It exists across boundaries of gender, figuration, and realness. The activist Alexander Leon recently said, "Queer people don't grow up as ourselves. We grow up playing a version of ourselves that sacrifices authenticity to minimize humiliation and prejudice. The massive task of our adult lives is to unpack which parts of ourselves are truly us and which parts we've created to protect us." This sentiment rings true to me. As a young queer architect, I've been negotiating the models I've been handed of how architects behave, work, and carry deep-seated values against who I am and want to be. My work, in a sense, is a start at unpacking what models of architecture I've received and trying to construct alternate ones. It's not to say that I believe there's a search for truth in queerness, not at all. Instead, I believe queerness is a frame for floating identities, for needing or not needing nomination, and for not requiring any explanation. My work takes this on through its material ease, its speculative nature, and its optimism. It looks under the hood, so to speak, at biases and defaults for other possible genres of architectural work. In some ways, I think of my thoughts on queerness as I look at Hesse's work, conceptual, untamable, and fleeting. These two projects, these two references, although not made from paper, may have something to speak to when thinking of querying the authenticity of models and materials. I think of Sarah Ahmed's recent book, The Uses of Use, where she speaks to the sense of papering over parts of ourselves and producing paperwork as a way to reify the gaps of bureaucracy. Paper and materials themselves are one form of authenticity, but as they meet the world of Zooming and digital interfaces, I believe they open up more identities and queer some, some architectural genres. This diagram and image are a latent theory for what this might mean moving forward in my work. A queer model authenticity can float between actual materials, models of materials, and a new, unknown digital materiality. This diagram is a way to start to represent the idea that an architecture could float between all three of these categories. The image on the right is a hopeful idea of what this could be. The goal of the work would be to imagine pulling this kind of image apart so that the human arms are the same size, but we didn't have two separate forms. It's also a sense to suggest that architecture is just as important as the things that annotate it, and that the annotated forms, things like people in an image like this, tell us as much about the work as the work itself. And the next two projects are a first attempt at working on these kinds of ideas. In this project, titled Two Scrolls, Hessie's cylinder is doubled into a form of a scroll and built at two sizes, 9 inches and 3 feet. It's modeled physically out of paper and digitally in a physics simulation engine. The form is both solid and rendered as a structural wireframe. The idea of a queer model authenticity would be to construct an architecture model from all of these tests, from physical paper zooms and from digital size simulations. Here's one attempt at putting all of these things together. This model is a model that's constructed of 3D printed parts from those digital physics simulations and from paper itself, which you can see is hiding inside the model there. The windows on this model suggest that the model represents a large building. You can begin to see some of the layers of this thing in the section here, which suggests stairs, floors, structure, and enclosure. In this alternate version, also made from those same tests, we can see the same window is much larger, suggesting that this represents a much smaller building. Here, the exterior is an actual piece of paper, whereas the interior is a 3D printed simulation of a larger piece of paper. And in this section, we can start to see the stairs also seem much larger, but the elements are still present of structure and enclosure. With the exterior shells removed, we can see that on the inside, the materials are reversed. What was paper on the exterior of the small building is a simulation on the interior, and vice versa for the larger building. These models are size specific. They can't be constructed at any other size, and their architecture is dependent on the performance of this model. I'll finish today just by showing some images from the online exhibition that you can find on the Architectural League's website. The exhibition shows a recent project proposal for a bathhouse in Los Angeles that builds on the ideas of this previous scroll project. The project is titled Inhale, Exhale, Sag, Flex, and takes the form of two masses with opposing ideas of form and materiality. This exhibit displays a proposal for using city-owned lots in Los Angeles to develop flexible, easily fabricated public bathhouses. The public bathhouse exists as an urban utility that produces an aura of collective imagination. Its primary function is to clean and relax bodies that are worked out in the city, but it's remembered as a space where foreign bodies care for themselves in a manner that is both personal and collective. Like the bodies within it, the bathhouse's architecture is continuously sanitized and maintained. The proposal is composed of two buildings, the steam house on the left and the pool house here on the right, and they're separated by a stair. The steam house on the left, Flex, is enclosed by an expanding quilt of water bladders that fill up as steam evaporates and bodies exhale. The pool house, Sag, is supported by a frame structure wrapped by building paper. The paper is periodically removed and dried once it's become too wet and soggy from absorbing pool splashes and water steam. Both buildings are interior landscapes of curtains, pipes, water, steam, plunges, and bodies, where both architecture and people unrobe and collectively self-care. Here in this section, you'll see on the left is, again, the steam house, and at its center is a large water bladder tank that contains all of the hot water for the building. And it's expanding into the steam room above. And the enclosure of the steam house is also these water bladder tanks. On the right is the pool house with a weight of water bearing down from its cold water tank on the roof and the pool on the second floor. Here is the ground floor plan. You'll notice there's no quote unquote front door. There's just an entrance to walk in. This is for the whole community. There's no permanent walls. Everything is thought of as material and infrastructure and is flexible. Things are enclosed in curtains or through piping that might prevent somebody from walking through. At the center are the stairs and an elevator. And like I said before, the interior really produces a kind of landscape of showers, plunges, changing rooms, and toilets. On the second floor, you'll find the sauna on the left and the large pool here on the right. The sauna is surrounded by cold and warm plunges and massage parlors, while the pool is inside of a large space surrounded by a kind of paper beach. So here's a view of the interior of the spa area. You'll notice the paper just kind of blends into the water itself, and the infrastructure, things like plumbing and electrical conduits are rendered the same way, and sort of construct a subsystem for enclosure. In this section, you'll notice under the area where this perspective is taken is a proposal for changing rooms and bathrooms. And this is a view of the pool, which ends up feeling a bit like a beach. And again, in the section on the left, you'll see how the water's weight bears down in this pool house building called SAG. These are some of the different infrastructures of the project, kind of highlighting all the different material and structural systems. And then we have some details that we started developing for how we would construct this thing. On the right, you can see, for example, for the paper, we would propose a PVC plastic sheets that would kind of cover the windows, whereas in the other building, we would have a kind of awning window that might swing. At the top of the buildings, in the pool house, the paper would be replaced with if you can see here, a roll of paper that you can just pull down and replace the paper with. And on the right, we have a gutter system that would recycle the water back into the bladders. And then these are some more views of the interior and the kind of intimate spaces under things or looking from shower to shower. Thank you very much. I appreciate everything. I appreciate the award. Thank you for listening.
Hi, we're Leslie Locke and Sasa Zivkovic from HANA. We would like to thank the ARC League for the award and the opportunity to share our work here this evening. For this lecture, we will discuss the work through the lens of the competition's theme, value. The title of our portfolio submission was Invaluable Propositions. To us, an invaluable proposition is, on the one hand, aiming to advance disciplinary dialogue, and on the other hand, in addition, generate value by promoting design equity, resource efficiency, or a certain kind of environmental stewardship. At HANA, from the ground up, digital design and fabrication technologies are intrinsic to the making of our work, facilitating new material methods, tectonic articulations, environmental practices, technological affordances, and forms of sustainable construction. In our research labs at Cornell, we build and embrace shared technology. In the past few years, we created open source construction machines, which we argue inevitably affect how we think and design through making a HANA. In our work, we aim to mind the tension between machine means and architectural ends across scales. HANA does not obsess over technology for technology's sake. As designers, we consider ourselves to be biased generalists rather than specialists. The various projects represented in this lecture inform form through a variety of methods of making, odd material applications, robotic routines, or socio-ecological narratives.
We think that fully unpacking the manufacturing tool or machine is an exciting opportunity for architects to reclaim authorship over processes of construction, which fundamentally influence the way we can build, or perhaps ought to build, in the future. While the machine is only a framework, our thesis is, with new tools come new architectural opportunities, not just in the research lab, but primarily in practice. However, in order to conduct research in advanced manufacturing and engage new methods of making, one needs the facilities, the means, and tools to do such work. In 2016, we designed and developed a fully open source 3D printer at the Cornell Robotic Construction Laboratory. The printer costs about $6,000 to make and is now able to print full-scale building components in foam, recycled plastic, and concrete. For us, access to the tool opens the door to novel and unfamiliar architectural speculation. In 2017, 1 year later, we purchased a 15-year-old used KUKA industrial robotic arm for $8,000 on eBay. The robot was formerly welding cars for GM at a manufacturing plant in Louisiana. And as with the printer, a certain amount of hacking is required to prepare this robot for architectural production. Following principles of open source community information sharing, we believe that new technology comes with a social responsibility to make these tools broadly accessible to everyone. All information on how to replicate our tools is available for all through the Open Source Factory platform on the RCL website. Our tools are never finished. They are constantly evolving with the architectural experiments we undertake at HANA. It took us about 3 months to develop a material mixture for concrete 3D printing. And during this process, we discovered that the 3D printer, a machine which has long been characterized as characterless, because it can presumably print anything, is in fact exactly the opposite. It has plenty of character and a multiplicity of what we like to call productive constraints. Most of those constraints are informed by concrete rheology and gravity, which both became our printing frenemies. Here you see a video of our first printing process, which we've done in the lab. And you see that the machine essentially prints one layer after another. It's a kind of three-dimensional drawing. In order to create three-dimensional form, the printer has to offset layers incrementally in a process very similar to structural corbelling. And this, of course, severely limits what we can print.
So rather than despair in the face of limitations, we see the manipulation of 3D printing rule sets as a tremendous opportunity to add design value. We think that concrete printing requires the development of an entirely new architectural language, which takes into the account of limitation of the process as well as its performative advantages. So here in additive architectural elements, 3D printing concrete enables the elimination of wasteful formwork and prompts the reemergence of corbelling as an anachronistic structural strategy. For this project, we chose 7 prototypical architectural motifs to explore through the lens of the 3D printer. And working first with the constraint of gravity, The mushroom column element embraces cantilever corbelling over support material by printing upside down, resulting in structural assemblies and horizontal striation that seamlessly transition between the vertical and the horizontal. And then we soon found out that the concrete printer cannot print in mid-air. Therefore, the simple task of creating a rectilinear window opening becomes seemingly impossible. In Corb Window, rather than drastically altering the process, for example, stopping the machine to insert a beam, shortcomings become opportunities for design. So if you ask us, 3D printer windows have to be triangular. The fourth column element is printed in section, which allows for careful calibration of material densities and patterns. And by depositing material where structurally necessary, the column can be optimized for forces and gravity, creating a type of transparent structural ornamentation. Similarly, Smart Push-Shape Wall explores a manipulation of concrete densities in plan, resulting in a wall which changes its composition based on structural, programmatic, or mechanical needs here. The potential for excessive ornamentation is also investigated in the doornament, where the delamination of the layers you see here creates screen-like moments of transparency. From a technical point of view, there is added economic and environmental value to 3D printing, which includes material savings, reduction of formwork waste, and the radical mass customization of components. However, there are severe shortcomings to working with concrete. The cementitious material itself has to change and become drastically more sustainable in order for 3D printing to become a viable future technology. While our concrete projects explore the benefit of 3D printing, we as designers have a responsibility to dig deeper and constantly challenge the materials we work with. So jumping scale from building elements to furniture, our next project here takes full advantage of the printer's ability to economically mass customize geometries and create a range of tailored seats for a variety of body types. The Rolling Stones project is the winning design of the Foley Function competition in 2018. The design is deeply informed by program, and in this case is public seating. The competition brief called for a design that could be movable by visitors and staff, but solid enough that visitors are discouraged from removing it from the park. So with concrete gravity working in our favor this time around, we had the second part covered from the get-go. Leveraging movement architecturally and its folly itself, the playful design encourages creative interaction and allows park visitors to discover a variety of seating configurations while moving the seats across the lawn. Responding to scales within the park landscape, the Rolling Stones can form long continuous bench, aggregate into smaller benches, or disperse to form solitary compositions. And each seat has 3 configurations. Some enable a more upright seating position, while others animate lounging and relaxation. In Rolling Stones, 3D printing with concrete enables the creation of 25 affordable and self-similar, but ultimately entirely individual seats. And no longer bound to the relentless paradigm of standardization, 3D printing opens the possibility for design freedom, customization, and individuality. As is evident in this photo, concrete is indeed hard to steal or row.
So on to another type of loop. Environmental cycles, birth, growth, and decay are intrinsic to complex forest ecosystems and processes. Conceptually and spatially, the Lognot project references these eternal cycles and reciprocal relationships between systems, both natural and technical. Lognot was designed in collaboration with Brian Habener at RCL and is a project that emerged from our first initial exploration with custom wood-based tools for the robot. It enables the construction of complex timber curvature with raw material and minimal farm work. In a reciprocal design process, the project fosters synergies and feedback between material, fabrication, digital form, and full-scale construction. As a building material, we encounter wood in the shape of 2x4s or plywood or other standardized dimensions. But trees are, as you can see in the background, inherently non-standard by nature. They have forks, they're not straight, they have all kinds of shapes. Small roundwood members or tree forks are usually not used for construction because today's sawmills are not equipped to process irregular tree geometries. But with a robotic arm and 3D scanning, we can process irregular trees and roundwood members. The mortise and tenon joints for log knot are milled in 4 separate operations from rough pass to finishing cut, using both the tip and the side of the milling spindle bit. The project uses computation to optimize each joint for moment forces. While they all look the same, each of these joints is precisely rotated and calibrated to resist local torsion. Working with small budgets, we did not have access to heavy machinery, and therefore developed a self-sufficient construction method that requires minimal formwork or support during the construction process. Unfamiliar notions of craftsmanship and precision, both digital and analog, emerge from log knot's conceptual design practice and construction technique. By questioning how forests are used as a resource, log knot provides a critical commentary on various perpetual wood cycles, economic, environmental, and cultural in nature. Our last and latest project, Ashen Cabin, also has some similarities to the previous project and shares its forest heritage. And that project follows 2 material narratives and is a culmination of Hana's applied design research as a critical practice. In the first material narrative, the project aims to reveal 3D printing's idiosyncratic tectonic language by exploring how the layering of concrete and the act of corbelling can suggest new strategies for building. The cabin was built in 2 phases. In 2017, we did the concrete, and then in 2019, we did the second part, which is a wooden envelope. The cabin is printed in components that function as sacrificial zero waste formwork for the main structure to eliminate substantial construction waste. The formwork is printed in small sectional modules to be transported and assembled manually at the remote construction site. In this project, we developed a new building process reliant upon 3D printed formwork and cast in place concrete with custom rebar. And here's a top view of the structure with the rebar cages. In this hybrid building process, unfamiliar tectonic expression is generated by the fabrication method and materiality. For example, the G-code and print path become visible as the ornamental pattern of the 3D printed floor slabs. Through corbelling, horizontal layers seamlessly transition from the leg to the slab and then into the chimney. Gently adapting to the site, the concrete structure lifts off the ground on legs which adjust to the sloped terrain. It is characterized by 3 programmatic areas, a table, a storage seat element, and a 21-foot tall fireplace.
The second material narrative focuses on a robotically fabricated wood envelope and is informed by a key environmental crisis of the ash trees in North America. The emerald ash borer is a small beetle whose larvae hatch underneath the tree's bark and cut off vital layers that transport nutrients throughout the trunk. And this invasive EAB currently threatens to eradicate most of the 8.7 billion ash trees in North America. And it has drastically transformed our entire forest ecosystems in the process. Just as a reference, almost every 10th tree in New York State is an ash tree. The EAB infestation is a huge environmental problem and climate risk. So while we designers cannot help the dying trees, we believe that infested trees form an enormous and untapped material resource for sustainable wood construction. Challenging preconceived notions about material standards in wood, the cabin utilizes infested wood for its envelope, which unfortunately is widely considered as waste. Each of the 10 trees we use in this project is worth only about 25 cents. And due to their challenging geometries, many infested ash trees cannot be processed by regular sawmills and are therefore regarded as unsuitable for construction. So by implementing high precision 3D scanning and robotic-based fabrication technology, as you can see in this quick clip here, irregularly shaped waste wood transform into abundantly available, affordable, and morbidly sustainable building material for the Anthropocene. And using the robot with a custom bandsaw end effector, we can slice irregular tree logs into naturally curved boards and strategically assemble the boards to form different surfaces conditions, which then inform the design of the building and vice versa. The sliced boards are arrayed into interlocking SIP facade panels, and solid offcuts can be structurally integrated into assembly, which then results in a minimum waste fabrication method. So as you see here, the facade assembly is actually fully ventilated, detailed to manage shrinkage, and it does not require an additional ring screen. Architecturally speaking, the Ashen Cabin walks the line between familiar and unfamiliar, between technologically advanced and formally elemental. The undulating wood surfaces accentuate the building's program and yet remain reminiscent of the natural log geometry which they are derived from. And the curvature of the wood is strategically deployed to highlight these moments of architectural importance, such as windows, entrances, roofs, drain scuppers, or canopies. On the inside of the cabin, we use predominantly straight log sections to create a contrast between the exterior and interior. So no longer bound to the paradigm of timber standardization, this project revisits woodcraft and design based on organic, found, and living materials. The cabin combines a variety of fabrication methods, material applications, geometries, and types of construction.
We believe that using newly invented forms of making from the ground up at the scale of a building affords unfamiliar and exciting design opportunities. At various scales, the cabin's performance, structure, and architectural expression are inherently derived from its digital construction protocols, robotic routines, materiality, and design logics. At the same time, in a mix of means, the project is inspired by precedent, history, program, ecological considerations, personal obsessions, and the creative misuse of technology. Together, the various and sometimes conflicting means, robotic or otherwise, inherently inform the creation of architectural expression and value within our work. We would like to thank our amazing and dedicated HANA team, and we would also like to thank and acknowledge our collaborators, sponsors, as well as Cornell AAP for their extraordinary support. Thank you.